Here's the problem. What do you do when you're disciplining your kids and they make you laugh? Oh, it's frustrating.
There are many outstanding legal questions for alleged child abuser Ruby Franke out of Utah. Why didn't she sue anyone accusing her of child abuse? What should we look out for with her husband? Is the Department of Child and Family Services to blame? We get into it all with acclaimed attorney Ben Chew, the man who famously represented Johnny Depp. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So we are continuing our analysis of this very disturbing Ruby Franke case out of Utah, the 41-year-old wife and mother of 6, who has now been charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse alongside her co-defendant and business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt. And one of the reasons this story is being followed by so many people is because Franke was a popular YouTuber. Yeah, she and her husband, Kevin Franke, they launched this YouTube channel called 8 Passengers back in 2015. It was all about them as a couple, their children. Very popular. It had over 2 million subscribers, and it focused on parenting and homeschooling. It was interesting because Franke and her husband are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she appeared also on these videos with Jodi Hildebrandt, who founded a life counseling organization known as Connections, previously known as Moms of Truth.
Let's talk about trust. What is trust?
All of this came to a head when police were alerted through a 911 phone call about that something was happening at Hildebrandt's residence.
911, the address of your emergency. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. We know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty. And he asked us to call the police.
What's
So
his
he's
name?
very afraid. This kid has obviously been... I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds. We need the cops here as soon as possible.
Now, according to a probable cause affidavit, Franke's 12-year-old son climbed out of a window at Hildebrandt's residence, ran to a neighbor asking for food and water. He was reportedly malnourished, emaciated. He had duct tape on his ankles and his wrists, these deep lacerations from being tied up. Just horrific to think about. And when police arrived, they found Franke's 10-year-old daughter in very similar conditions. So Franke, Hildebrandt, they were arrested. They were each charged, as I said, with 6 counts of child abuse. Each count goes up to 15 years in prison. That's the maximum. And there is a lot to digest in this case, including a recent court hearing that was absolutely derailed when the Zoom link was shared online and hundreds of people tried to sign on. We're going to get into that. But I want to bring in right now a very special guest to talk about this case. I'm joined by acclaimed attorney Ben Chew, who famously represented Johnny Depp in his lawsuit against Amber Heard, a case dominated by abuse allegations and what is abuse at the center of it. Ben, it is so good to see you. Now, I would say I haven't seen you in a while, but that would mean that I haven't seen you in person, which is true. I have seen you a lot because I was just binging the Netflix documentary where you are featured prominently. I have to imagine, Ben, that you have been inundated with people writing you and telling you that they saw you. Am I wrong?
Jesse, you're right. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you again. Yes, I wasn't aware that was coming out until recently, but yes, it seems to have been gotten a lot of eyes on it.
I share that because I didn't realize when it was coming out, and then I just get a million texts, messages, all these things. Were you just in the documentary? Were you just in it? Were you just in it? And apparently I was in it. I didn't even, wasn't totally aware, but yeah.
You definitely are in it.
I am in it. I am in it. So Ben, good to see you. Let's talk about this case. I just want to start. We haven't spoken about it. What are your initial thoughts when you heard about this case?
As a father of two kids, 11 and 12 years old, it really makes my blood boil. I just did a service trip with 23 12-year-old boys and girls. So I've had a firsthand look at how innocent they still are. And the thought of this boy and then his sister being emaciated and mistreated, it really shocks the conscience.
It really does. And I think there's such an incredible interest in this case. If it was just an abuse case in and of itself, a mom of 6 doing this, what she's accused of, but the fact that she was this YouTuber and people were suspecting it for a while and were invested in the case, a thing or two about high profile cases. And I'm going to give you an example here. So as of right now, Franke and Hildebrandt, they're continue to be held without bail following a hearing from last week. That hearing was delayed when the Zoom link was circulated, I believe, on TikTok, and over 1,000 people tried to join this hearing, caused absolute chaos, huge technical problem. It delayed it. The live stream was shut off. Just walk me through why you think there's so much interest in this kind of case.
Well, I think you have a person who is obviously very popular on social media. She's very physically attractive. You can see, how this would generate interest. You also have the sensational allegations and, 6 children being abused. So I think it's natural that there would be a lot of attention to this. And frankly, I would think there'd be a lot of outrage as well.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the prosecution of Franke and Hildebrandt that the public is so invested in this?
Hopefully it won't impact the prosecution at all. I mean, I think they really should play it by the book. In other words, just treat her the way they would treat any other mother who was accused of abusing 6 children. And hopefully they will do that. I know as a practical matter, it's impossible to just close your eyes and pretend the cameras aren't there. But as much as you can do that, I think the better off you are, because if you start playing to the cameras or start thinking too much about the media, I think you're going to take your eye off the ball. I mean, Novak Djokovic said yesterday, after he won his 24th Grand Slam, that in the last 24 hours before the match, he asked his wife and his family and his supporters not to talk about how much attention there would be to this. And I think the prosecutors should take a leaf from that book.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. On another point, they might be saying the more people know about this, maybe they can bring out further evidence that they didn't have, allegations, things like that. And I think that's important. Yeah, right. I think that's going to be important as well. The fact that, oh my goodness, look what came to light. Now someone might feel comfortable coming forward and say, let me tell you what I saw or heard.
That's a great point, Jesse. We have a case right now where the plaintiff had filed as John Doe. And the first thing we did was move the court to identify him. And the moment the court identified him and made him disclose his name, we were inundated with information about this plaintiff, which was very helpful. Now, that's a civil case. Obviously, it's very different, but
right.
I think it would apply even more so, as you said, to a criminal case.
I have to ask you about what happened at this hearing. Again, because of it completely broke down, I don't think we have video of this, but what the reporting indicates from multiple outlets, apparently Ruby Franke was crying in court, and she made these claims that one of her minor children was sexually abusing their sibling and molested several family members, children in the neighborhood, at least I think 20 people. She claimed that this child abused 20 people. She claimed that 2 of her children were playing some sort of padding game, didn't go into further detail, talked about how one of the children was watching pornography at a young age. It's so shocking, and I'm not sure what that means to her defense or what that means to her case for her to make this kind of claim.
I think it's tremendously detrimental to her case. First of all, I mean, she should have, if any of this were true, she should have reported it at the time. rather than waiting to be arrested and arraigned. So that's number one, because if that abuse was going on, that's on her and her husband, to the extent that the husband was there, which I understand he may not have been. So we shouldn't impugn him at all right now. But that all points the finger at her. And also the fact that she would make those allegations against her own children in a public forum. Now, I don't know whether she identified the child, but it wouldn't be hard to figure out since it's a finite universe of 6. I think it's terrible for her defense. I think it also shows it doesn't shine a very good light on her character, that she would say these things in public, even if true.
So the judge said that this child will then need to be placed in a home with no other children in light of these allegations. Again, this is based on the reporting of what happened in that hearing. I'm glad I have you, because I wanted to ask you first about that. If this is totally false and this is just a wild, outlandish claim, could a minor child have a legal action against a parent like this?
Yes, I think so. And I think the cause of action would be stayed until that child hits adulthood. So I don't think the not to be too technical about this, but I think the child does not have to move with the alacrity that anybody else, that an adult would have to move. I think there's a legal presumption that allows him to go to adulthood before the statute of limitations clock begins to run. But yes, I absolutely do think the child has a cause of action against the mother for defamation and for, could be, physical battery and all kinds of other civil versions of the criminal charges that have been filed.
Yeah, before I even get to my next point, I guess in terms of the victims in this case, there's the criminal aspect, but we always know that there's also a civil aspect. Do you anticipate that is something we should be on the lookout? Children suing Ruby Franke for this alleged abuse?
Absolutely. And again, I think they have the luxury, although luxury may not be the right word, but they have the luxury of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, as you know, people wait until the criminal case has been fully adjudicated before filing the civil action, or they try to stay the statute of limitations. Here, they won't have that issue. But yeah, absolutely, I would anticipate a civil action by the children. But then you get into the issue of, what type of recovery is possible and what kind of assets is Franke going to have at the end of the day. I know she's a YouTube celebrity, but I think the cost of her criminal defense is going to be such, I don't know what kind of assets she's going to have to satisfy a judgment.
And remember, I said alleged because I'm very curious to see what can be proven. And this is one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, Ben, because I am bothered by something. I'm bothered by the fact that people for a while suspected that Franke was up to no good. There was a change.org petition set up where people signed to have Franke investigated for allegations of child abuse. They wanted Child Protective Services to get involved. There was criticism of her online. People were making comments about her. She responded to those comments. Police were called to the home last year after they received reports over the well-being of the kids. In fact, Shari Franke, Ruby's daughter, called police to alert them that the kids had been left home alone for, I think it was 5 days. This happened back in September of 2022. So you have all these people saying these things about Ruby Franke and doing all these things in light of Ruby Franke. Here's the part I don't understand, I'm bothered by. If all of this was fake, if all of this was lies spread about her, why didn't Ruby Franke ever file a lawsuit for defamation against anybody, right? And I never saw that she did. Is that not revealing to you?
It is, because you can imagine, Jesse, if you were accused of such a monstrous thing, or if I were, that would be my first inclination. Now, she would probably have to prove actual malice, which, as you know, is knowledge or reckless, extreme recklessness as to the truth. But I think you would take that on, if you had been accused of this. So I think it is very telling. And in the case of Johnny Depp, he certainly took it on despite all the inherent risks of a defamation case because he needed to clear his name.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you could say, well, maybe she felt that nobody was believing her. I don't know. The YouTube channel, she stopped posting videos. She was responding to the criticism, so it seemed like people were believing what was being said about her, which, again, raises the question why she didn't take legal action if all of this was fake. And also, I'll mention, Ben, when she was arrested, when she was taken into custody, she requested a lawyer and did not speak to police. Now, do you find that to be, hey, that was just a smart legal strategy, she shouldn't say anything? Or is it suspicious? Because, again, if she really had nothing to do with this and she's arrested, she could have easily said, wait a second. My kids are abused. What are you talking about? Are they okay? She chose not to say anything and lawyered up. Your thoughts?
I think it's both. I mean, I think it's both smart legally, but it's also suspect, especially as a mother or a parent. I think your first concern would be the well-being of the child. And once you were satisfied that your 12-year-old was in safe hands, your concern would be to clear your name and to find out exactly what happened. So yes, I do find it suspicious. So it's not something that the jury will hear.
I wanted to talk to you about something that I was talking about, how things didn't happen earlier. Could she have been arrested earlier? Could this have been stopped earlier? And I wanted to ask you about whether the Department of Child and Family Services could be in legal trouble. I mentioned how police were contacted to check in on the Frankes. Police Lieutenant Warren Foster told NBC News that police made several attempts to follow up what was going on. He said that there were inquiries from the DCFS. DCFS yielded no results. Apparently, they were called to the House in 2020. You have Representative Christine Watkins, who is a chair of a panel that reviews the DCFS. And she said, quote, I had concerns when I heard about the case. Not only were neighbors calling, but older siblings were calling too. It sounds like those kids were in pretty bad shape. And it's certainly something we have the right to call DCFS out on to know what might have gone wrong. We always have this conversation in child abuse cases. Why did not, the Department of Family and Child Services do more? Could they be held liable in any way? What do you think?
Yes, I believe they could be. DCFS will enjoy, and I don't know the particular Utah statute, but they will enjoy some measure of sovereign immunity, but it should not be impossible to sue them. I've had cases where we've sued government entities, state government entities, and you have to navigate around the immunity issues. But absolutely, they can be sued, and it sounds like they have a lot to answer for in this case. I mean, just one of the clips showed her on her program saying that she wouldn't feed the children until they completed their chores. Now, again, as a parent, you do want your kids to do their chores, but I think it is wildly inappropriate, if not abusive, to withhold breakfast until they've done their chores. I mean, I think there are other inducements you can give to your children, but it certainly dovetails with the allegation that two of the children at least were emaciated.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think there was one video where she's telling her son that they would lose the privilege to eat dinner if the child continued play fighting. There's another video where she said that her 6-year-old needed to go hungry after forgetting to take her lunch to school. I imagine it's videos like that that could be a key piece of evidence in a future prosecution against her. We talked about her husband, Kevin Franke. He hasn't been arrested. He has a lawyer, and his lawyer appeared on Good Morning America and claimed that Kevin, had no role in the alleged abuse of these children, that Kevin and Ruby have been living separately for 13 months. I'm curious in his position, what he might be looking out for in terms of comments that are made about him if people are falsely accusing him of abuse. But at the same time, I wonder if people are thinking, well, if this is a pattern of abuse of these kids that was going on for quite some time, A, would he be a witness? Or B, could he potentially be criminally charged? And so his position right now, I'm very curious legally, where do you think it stands?
Yeah, he is in a tricky position, and a lot of it, as you suggested, Jesse, is going to go to the physical evidence. I believe with the 12-year-old who escaped through the window and got to the neighbors, that there was evidence of there were a lot of sores, And it would be interesting to get the medical reports from the doctors to see whether there are any scars and how they can date back the injuries. Because if there was evidence of physical injuries before the 13 months, beyond the last 13 months, then he's got a lot of explaining to do. You can't let your spouse abuse your children. So, and not, again, as you said, we have to be careful. We don't know that that happened. We don't know that the abuse went back further, but that's going to be a crucial issue for the police, and will be a crucial issue for him. But no matter what, at a minimum, he is going to be a material witness. It's also hard, just from a matter of common sense, although I guess it's not impossible, that the abuse suddenly started 13 months ago.
I'm sure he's seen the children in that time and spoken to Ruby Franke. And so if he knew something, that's where the questions begin. But again, he has not been criminally charged with anything. He is an innocent party at this point. And people, I guess they're free to speculate, but they have to be careful with what they say about Kevin Franke.
They should. And it goes back to a larger point you have made is that there, not only do you have a presumption of innocence, but we also have a belief in due process in the country. And that even, of course, applies to Franke herself. Although, the outburst at the arraignment really, suggests a lot of things that aren't good for her. But definitely, I think, let it play out. I don't know why people have to necessarily leap to conclusions. We all saw the Duke lacrosse case. We've seen a number of instances where allegations are not proven. So I think people should take a deep breath and let it play out. Let the system play out. And there may be other reasons why, the police have not indicted the husband yet.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very fair point, and I think it's important for people to remember that. Look, when we followed your case, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, a central theme is, well, what is abuse? It's obviously, we know the classic definition of physical abuse, but is there emotional abuse? Is there psychological abuse? And it really became a study in that. So, because you are an expert on what this means, I was very curious to your thoughts on the charges here. I did it in a past sidebar. So they're each facing 6 counts. And the way to summarize it is basically, when we talk about aggravated child abuse under Utah law, it's a physical injury that could be torture. That's one charge. Another charge could be any, physical injury that results in starvation or malnutrition. There's another one, physical injury that creates a severe emotional harm, a developmental delay, intellectual disability. There's another one where it's physical injury and includes a combination of 2 or more physical injuries inflicted by the same person, whether at the same time or at a different time. It seems so broad and includes so many different potential acts that they charged Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt under. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, I think I think there's a sharp distinction to be made between adults and children. So it's one thing if you were to berate me or make horrible statements about me, which I hope you wouldn't.
I would never.
I have the highest respect for you, but that would have one impact. But it's quite another if it's an adult to a child. So a physical abuse, everybody would agree, whether it's an adult or a child, that is abuse. And it can be civil and criminal. But when you're talking about a child, berating in a sharp manner strikes me as far more abusive than an argument between spouses or an argument between partners in a law firm. Things can get heated without being abusive. And then you multiply that by several factors when you're talking about a parent. Something that a parent can say to a child has enormous impact. We've all read stories, of people, and I remember things my parents said to me when I was a child, that not abusive, but you remember the good and the bad. So I think there's a real scale, and I think all of what has been alleged here would certainly fall into the category of abuse, because you're talking about really minor children.
Yeah.
12 is really young. Those
10.
kids are not mature emotionally.
10
when
and
a
12,
parent-
the two victims.
it's
Yeah.
just it's beyond belief. And again, going back to the presumption of innocence, she has that, but the allegations here all would seem to justify the 6 indictments.
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about it, and you said it, you're dealing with such a defenseless victim, a vulnerable victim who's in the care and the custody of another, and it becomes very tough to defend, which is what I want to end our conversation on. Potential defenses for Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, considering that not only the charges that I mentioned would be found guilty of if they themselves inflicted this injury, but the statutes also read that if they permitted another to do it, they could be found guilty. So I'm not sure what the defense is. Do they blame each other? Do they say they had no idea what was happening, even though it was their children were found in Jodi's residence? The fact that I believe they published a video 2 days earlier when they were both there and the children were there. I don't know what a potential defense could be for either Franke or Hildebrandt. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. And to the extent that one of them tries to go down the road, especially Franke, that, oh, gee, I don't know what was happening at Hildebrandt's house, well, then there's a negligence and abuse right there. I mean, we make very careful if someone's looking after our kids or they're going to somebody else's house, we know who they are and we know what's going on and we know their background. So I think you're right. I think Franke is in a real trick box in terms of defenses, and Hildebrandt certainly is as well. I think she may go down the route, or they may consider going down the route of some kind of mental defect. Maybe arguing something about the breakup of her marriage or the separation. But that goes back to the point of when the abuse began. I don't think most people begin abusing their children just because they get separated or divorced. I mean, that wouldn't be an excuse anyway, but
Yeah.
they have to look for something like that, because otherwise I think I think all jurors would really empathize with kids at these age. And what really struck me, and I'm sorry for going on too long, is the 12-year-old saying, "It was my fault." I mean, that almost made me cry when I saw that. I mean, that really shows, as much as the injuries, the extent of abuse that this kid had, is that somehow he believed that not being fed and, being tied by his ankles and his wrists was somehow his fault. And that's just heartbreaking.
The whole case is incredibly heartbreaking to think about, and we're going to probably learn a lot more as it continues through the system. Ben Chu, always great to have you on. Great to see you. And of course, I would never say anything bad about you to impugn your character in any which way, sir. So good to have you on. Thank you very much.
In the unlikely event that you did, I would never bring an action against you.
Good to know. Good to know, but it'll never happen. Ben, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.